Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. 200 years ago, before the canon events of this story begins, a small child was seen within a hospital with a weird ability. The ability to glow brightly. This here will become the first ever recorded child to ever have a weird power that was exclusive to themselves. And over the many years that time passes, more and more children appear with powers. Even some adults appear with them as well. As time progresses over many powers being used, we can hear the sound of fighting coming from a small park near present day. Kaken, stop it. He can't fight you anymore. A young boy called out, looking scared. The blond boy who was named Kaken looked over at the boy protecting his prey, with a fierce fear being projected across his body. A tuft of emerald, green hair, as well as the same colored eyes as they stared at him fearfully, standing in front of his quarry. Well, if it isn't Deku, what are you doing here? Kaken questioned, glaring hatefully at the boy. I am here to stop you. The boy called out once more, but this time his legs tremble even harder. The boy just has his buddies join him in beating down Deku as they leave him with burns, as well as cuts all over his body. The boy himself lays on the ground, groaning in pain as he stared in the sky. The beautiful sky that seems to call to him every single day. My name is Midoriya Izuku, and this is the story of how I became both a hero and a father at a very young age. Our protagonist said, as we fast forward towards present day, we find our protagonist Midoriya running through a very futuristic cityscape as he is wearing a black gakurin. Although the clothing looks like it's seen better days, we find him stopping at a train station as he watches a hero defending it from a giant villain. The hero was named by the crowd to be Kimui Woods, and the hero does his best in order to ensnare a villain through his super move, preemptive binding, lacquered chain prison, but only to be cut off when another hero jumps in, kicking the villain to the ground unconscious. Midoriya writes all the information down in a notebook as he smiles at them all. He was around 10 at the moment, and he shook his head, moving towards school. He shivered at the thought of going there again. But he still had at least 2 more years at the school if he wanted to get to a good university like UA. So, gathering his courage, he heads on his way to the school, where he prepares for a beating of a lifetime. As it turned out, he really needed that courage, as the moment he entered the school grounds of Aldera High School, everyone just wanted to show him his place, which was apparently in the dirt, as he was currently being held by one Bakugo Katsuki, who had been burning his back with his palms. Remember this, nerd. Don't go to UA. That is a school for a real hero. Got it? Katsuki questioned as Izuku grumbled before nodding. Then get out of my sight, monster. I don't want to see you until class, Bakugo said, before walking away with his friends. Standing back up, Izuku shook the dirt out of his hair as he went to the bathrooms to take a look at his injuries. Once inside, he finds that there are 2 more burns on his lower back, just above his rear, which causes him to curse silently. There goes my chance of sleeping on my back tonight, Izuku mumbled to himself. Leaving the room after putting some burn cream as best as he could over the burns and wrapping them up, he left for class. Once he was in his seat, he prepared for what the class had to do for their career forms. The teacher had entered the room as well with the stack of papers and handed them out. All right, class, as much as I would prefer that you all not sign these papers, I would like you all to write down your potential colleges that you wish to go to. Once you're finished with them, I need you to turn them in. Once that is complete, you can go back to your seats, and then you can focus on the lesson plan for the next few days, the teacher said, as he passed out each and every paper to the students. Although once he found Izuku's desk, he found a singular red spider lily on the desk and scowled. He wasn't a fan of whoever kept doing this. They kept destroying school property, but it was worse for Izuku as the young man sat there. The teacher wasn't ever kind to the boy, more or less trying to get the 2 best students of his classes to fight. Bakugo and Midoriya were the school's prodigies in terms of academics. Although Bakugo had used his academics to increase his quirk's abilities, Midoriya had kept himself academically ahead of their star pupil. So the school decreases Izuku's points per class so that Bakugo could be the one on top, whilst Izuku is kept at 2nd place. But seeing the red spider lily on Izuku's desk caused the teacher to look at the young man who was staring at it as well. The boy just sighed and placed it within his backpack before looking at the teacher. Said teacher saw just how tired the young man really was. It was honestly very scary to see a 10-year-old with such tired eyes. It made him appear as though he was already an adult. Placing the paper on Izuku's desk, the teacher moved on, believing that he had known what he was supposed to do. For the remainder of the class, the students worked diligently as they wrote on the papers as well as did their class assignments for the day. Izuku, though, was so far ahead that they had been keeping to himself, and once lunch was called for the students, Izuku went to the school's roof. Pulling out the red spider lily from his backpack, Izuku placed it on a small gardening plant pot as he let out a sigh. Seriously, another one. At this rate, I might as well be a gardener for red spider lilies at this point. Izuku muttered to himself. Placing the new lily with the others he had collected since he was in late elementary and the start of the new year, Izuku placed it softly in the pot and kept its stem in the dirt. Watering it as well as placing it near the small greenhouse on the roof, he sat down and pulled out his lunch. It wasn't much, but it would be enough for him considering he never really ate too much when it came to food. Either it would be beaten out of him, or it would be stolen by the bullies around him, and finding himself on the roof, Izuku knew that nobody would mess with him unless they felt really into beating on him. And sure enough, Bakugo broke through the doors as he glared at Izuku with a quiet fury. I thought I told you not to apply for UA, you quirkless piece of trash. Katsuki growled as Izuku instinctively crawled backwards. Making himself appear as small as possible, he looked at the blonde boy with fear as he spoke. I was just applying for general studies, Izuku said, as the boy was really going there for the moment. That's not going to work, Deku. You are not going to apply for UA. That is an order, Katsuki said, as his hands popped with his quirk. No, I am not your servant. Nor am I someone who you can boss around anymore. It's my dream to enter UA as well. You can't take that away from me, Izuku said, for once getting slightly more courageous. That's it, Katsuki called out, grabbing Izuku by his collar and pulling him to the roof's edge. He lifted Izuku with so little effort that the young man had nearly dropped Izuku from the surprise of how little Izuku weighted with his one hand holding onto him. Dangling Izuku over the edge of the building, Katsuki growled at him as the young man was scrambling to hold onto the ledge. Don't enter UA, Deku. Do that and I will not drop you from this height. If you do, then you will fall, and Auntie Inko won't have to worry about your quirkless but anymore. And then she will have to place all her worries on me, Katsuki said, as Izuku glared at the boy. I won't listen to you, Kakin. I will get into UA, and you won't stop me, Izuku said, as Katsuki growled even more before letting go of the young man. Izuku, flailing about for just a millisecond, manages to grab one of the lower floor's windowsills for a brief moment before he slips off of it. Although unknown to Izuku, the action did break his hand and fingers respectively. As he continued to fall, he watched as Katsuki looked over the edge, watching as the boy was moving closer and closer to the ground. But just as he was about to hit the ground, Izuku was tackled out of the air and onto the ground by someone. As the rush of adrenaline had pumped through his veins, he had nearly forgotten that he had let out a scream of fear when Katsuki dropped him from the roof. The last thing Izuku saw before passing out was light blue hair, as well as purple eyes staring at him in both fear as well as worry. A young woman was seen walking through the halls of Aldera High School. She had been very curious about the boy within Class 1D. He had green hair as well as eyes, but the most important thing about him that stood out to her was his general kindness to any and all people. She had come from a long lineage of villains who had quirks suited perfectly for the villainous activities of society. But she herself had decided to break that trend and decided to pursue for a different career aside from being a villain. She had wanted to become a hero's manager, and with how the green-haired young man had been touting about how he wanted to become a hero, she saw that he did analysis on most heroes as well as their costumes, fighting styles, as well as their patrol routes, which were something that were supposed to be secret to the rousing public who were wanting to find out where heroes patrolled. So as she learned what the young man did every day, she had learned about things that she never thought was real. The young man was physically, mentally, and quite literally beaten every single day within the school. Hell, she had heard from people in the same grade how this extended all the way to when the boy was 4 years old. If he had nobody to help him during his times of stress as well as pain and suffering, she would attempt to help him. So as she was leaving school today, she never had come to expect to hear the sound of a young man screaming in fear. Looking up behind her, everything had started to move in slow motion for her. The boy who she had been researching for the last few weeks was seen falling off the building. But she had seen who was up there with him just moments before the boy had fallen to the 6th story. A boy with blonde, spiky hair was walking away from the edge, with a slight smirk on his face as he turned. Running as fast as her legs could carry her, she managed to jump in the air, just enough to manage to tackle the young man to the ground without having him die or be hurt too badly. She found that the young man had also unconsciously wrapped his arms around her to protect her body from the tackle she had made. Hearing a hissing sound from the young man, she moved to her knees as she looked him over, her light blue hair moving slightly in her way. But as she moved some of the green tufts of hair from his face, she saw 4 freckles on his cheeks, in a perfect diamond shape. Blushing at the look on his face for a moment, she shook her head and started to softly shake him to make sure he wasn't dead. "Hey, wake up, please don't be dead. Come on, don't make me have to kiss you to wake you up," she said, not wanting him to be faking this. But he then sorts of groaned softly as he held a hand to the lower portion of his back, hissing in slight discomfort. "Hey, be careful, you just fell from a 7-story building," she said, as the boy looked at her now, eyes wide open. "I think my favorite color is green now," she thought before the boy spoke. "Who are you? Why did you save me?" the boy asked, as the girl introduced herself. "My name is Kori Kazuyuki, and I was the one who saw you falling from the building. Can you tell me what happened?" she asked, as the boy nodded. Explaining to Kori was easy as the young man just spilled his heart as well as soul to her, not aware of how angry she was becoming, not at him, but at Bakugo. She had heard of the young man through her time through Aldera, and they were not good things. People thought she had liked the man, but she in truth hated him. The simple fact that he would go after someone who was quirkless and beat them down into the dirt every single day. It made her sick. She hadn't done anything before now because of the fact that she feared what would happen to the boy if she interfered. "My name is Midoriya Izuku. Nice to meet you, Kazuyuki-san," Izuku said, as the young man blushed at her. "Don't worry about anything, Midoriya-kun. Just doing what any other person should do," she said, as tears came to the boy's eyes. "Thank you, really. I thought I was going to see my mom again," Izuku said, as Kori stared at him in shock. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, as she helped him up. "My mom's been dead for the last few years. She died in a fire in our apartment a few years ago. I haven't had anyone home ever since then," Izuku said, as Kori asked a new question. "Where are you living currently, and how are you able to go to school exactly?" "Oh, I live in the nearby orphanage. Since I am around 10, the government placed me in an orphanage," Izuku said, as Kori just let out a sigh. "Come with me tonight. You can stay with me and my parents," she said, pulling him by the hand. "I'm not to sound like a broken record, but don't I need to, be adopted into your family to join you home?" Izuku asked, as Kori stared at him. "We are going to be friends now, and you are going to stay with me for tonight. Am I clear?" Kori asked, as Izuku trembled slightly but nodded. "Good. Now tell me about what you want to be when you grow up," Kori said, as the boy stuttered out his dreams. It seems like she was correct about him. He really wants to become a quirkless hero, but he will have to train his body for it. Good thing she knows the perfect people to help him out with this dream of his. Izuku entered the home for Kori as she took off her own shoes. Izuku not far behind the girl, he followed her through the small home towards the couch. Kori had then run towards the bathroom in order to get some cleaning supplies as Izuku sat down on the couch looking around the living room. He looked at each and every picture of Kori's family as they stood in front of each place they had been to in the last few years or months. Izuku had been too enthralled with each image that he never noticed that Kori had returned back from the bathroom with a small medical kit. She had then sat down next to him as he flinched slightly at her arrival and looked at the kit in her hands as she stared at him expectantly. "What do you need me to do?" Izuku asked, as the girl sighed. "I need to make sure that you didn't get hurt when you fell from the roof," Kori said, as Izuku took his shirt off. Kori took in the large number of scars on his upper chest, as well as lower abs, as she looked at how swollen his hands were. "I think you broke your hands when you grabbed the window on the 4th floor," Kori said, wrapping the bandages over his hands. "Yeah, they really hurt. Not as bad as when I get exploded, but enough to have a dull throb," Izuku said, as Kori stared at him in disbelief. "You don't feel any kind of pain from your hands? What about the burns on your back?" she asked, as Izuku shut his mouth up. "I don't have a very low tolerance to pain. I have dealt with this for the last 6 years of my life. I can deal with a couple more. Izuku mumbled as Kori smiled at him in sadness. Nobody should have enough pain tolerance that you don't feel the pain you should feel when you break a bone or two, Kori said, finishing up wrapping his hands and upper torso. The two just sat in silence as Izuku just took in the quiet time as he pulled out a notebook that Kori noticed had some words on it. Hero analysis for my future NO, 13. How many of those notebooks have you made? Just asking because of the title. Kori questioned Izuku as the young man had tensed. I've made 12 others, but they mostly talk about heroes and some villains that I've seen out on the streets, Izuku said, as Kori thought about something before smirking. Do you want to write about my quirk? She asked, as she watched him become starry-eyed. What is your quirk? Is it related to your hair? How about your eyes? Which are very pretty, by the way, not to mention how you seem to be able to carry me fairly easily. Izuku started to mutter off as Kori looked surprised for a moment before giggling. Once Izuku heard the giggling, he placed a hand over his mouth as he apologized for muttering to himself about her quirk. Don't worry, Midoriya. Just startled me is all, and my quirk is called ice manipulation. I can manipulate any and all ice from any atomic structure that I can find nearby, not to mention I can generate it from almost nothing, Kori said, as Izuku started another muttering spree about all the different ways she could use her power in order to save others. As much as helping others in rescue efforts entices me, I would like to just stay away from all the heroism. I would much rather become a teacher for a school who would take me in. I really am good with little kids, Kori said, as Izuku nodded. The two would remain sitting on the couch before the pain started to get to Izuku, as the young man just decided to just sleep for a bit on the couch. Kori, now on her own with Izuku asleep, had to come up with a reason for having a boy sleeping on her family's couch. She was pacing back and forth in the kitchen as she thought about what she needed to inform her family about. But as luck would have it, she didn't have any, as the mother and father of Kori had entered through the front door with smiles on their faces. I can't believe we got away with that heist in Mia Prefecture. I knew that bank couldn't keep up with our ice quirks. I can't wait to bring our daughter into this business, Kori's father said, as he entered the kitchen. Hey Kori dear, how are you doing today? Kori's mother asked, looking at her softly. As much as Kori hated to admit it, but she knew that her parents weren't really good people per se, but they had been given a bad life by their parents and were forced into a life of crime to survive on the streets. And because of that, they had accidentally met one night and had Kori herself and were forced to take care of a group of 3. I'm fine, just need to inform you both about the fact we have a guest in the living room, Kori said, as her mother stared at her for a moment. Who is it? Is it a boy? I swear if he hurt you, Kori's mother asked, before ranting. No, I saved him from falling off the roof of our school, Kori said, as both parents stopped in their tracks. Did he jump, or was he pushed? Kori's father questioned with urgency. He was pushed off the edge of the building by a bully of his. He calls him Kakin. But from what I know, his name is Katsuki Bakugo, if everything I heard about him at Aldous said about him is correct, Kori said, as her parents entered the living room to find Izuku sleeping soundly. He looks malnourished. How has he lasted this long at a school such as that if he looks like he's seen better days? Kori's mother asked. He is bullied at school. It's not too much of a stretch for him to be bullied at the orphanage he lives at as well, Kori herself said, as her parents now stopped dead in their tracks. Orphanage? Which one is it? Her father questioned. It's the orphanage for quirkless youth, I believe. But I'm not sure where it is in Mizutofu, Kori said, as her parents sighed in slight frustration. I've heard that quirkless individuals were very rare, not to mention that growing up we heard that they were delinquents, Kori's mother said, as her father nodded along. Well, that seems to be completely wrong, Kori bluntly states as her parents looked to her for an explanation. From what I gathered from the amount of time we'd been together in home, he was not a delinquent, but actually, a kind person who was dealt a very bad hand in life. I'm just not sure how he hasn't gone cynical yet, Kori said, as her father looked at the boy closely. He's got a few broken fingers in his left hand, but the right hand is completely broken, bones and all. He needs to head to the hospital, he said, as Izuku woke up right then and there. Don't send me there, Izuku called out, moving to a corner of the couch. Kori immediately ran over to Izuku as the young man continued to have a very bad panic attack and started to hyperventilate. As Kori placed her hands on his arms, the young man's eyes looked erratically around the room as they soon found Corey's light blue eyes and started to tremble less. "Don't worry, Midoriya. Just breath in for a few seconds and then release for a few seconds," Corey said, as Izuku followed her lead. The silence in the room was palpable as the parents really saw how skinny the boy was, as they could see his ribs from how he was pushing himself into their couch. "We need to get him into a hospital. He won't last much longer without getting much exercise as well as food. We can barely take care of all three of us," Corey's mother said, as the father stared at Izuku. "I can skip out on some meals so he can eat, Liz. We need to make sure that Midoriya is safe and sound within this home, much less take care of how he will soon become part of our family." "Young man, do you know who your parents are?" Corey's father questioned. "And my mother is Inko Mi Midoriya. She died a few years ago. I don't know where my dad is, though. All I know is what my mother told me," Izuku said, still attempting to not hyperventilate. "Do you know exactly where he is?" he asked again as Izuku tried his best to remember. "I think he's in the United States. I remember my mother telling me about his job there," Izuku said, as the family of three nodded. "Can you get in contact with him?" Corey asked, as Izuku shook his head. "He left as soon as my quirkless diagnosis came in. He fought my mother for a while before leaving," Izuku said, as Corey's father gained a very sad expression. "He hurt you on his way out, didn't he?" Liz asked, as Izuku turned his head around to show them a scar from a very bad burn. "He didn't want a quirkless son. He wanted a son who had a mixture of his and my mother's quirks," Izuku said, as the trio just sighed in frustration. It was a few days after that event that the Kazuyuki family had adopted Izuku into their family, although Izuku had started to show early signs of love towards their daughter. So they decided that they wouldn't talk about how with him being adopted into their family would change anything about the relationship building. It was during these days that Izuku stayed as close to Corey as possible so that he didn't have to worry about meeting up with Katsuki during school hours. Although he couldn't head to her classes as well, he was still beaten up every single day that Corey couldn't get to him. Bakugo had made it prevalent that he wanted to make sure that nothing got in his way of becoming a hero from Aldera, even if that meant trying to get Izuku out of the picture. He even noticed how Izuku was hanging out with a girl from another class and tried to get her to leave him alone, but was surprised when Izuku immediately defended her, as well as Izuku himself was defended against by the girl. Because of this, the school started to beat down on them both in order to try and break them apart from one another. Although Izuku was trying his very best to keep their eyes on him, for being quirkless and a free target, Corey would still get bullied physically in each class she entered. Although differently from how Izuku was bullied, she actually fought back against her own bullies, giving them a piece of their own medicine. Through the trauma of being bullied and considered outcasts by their peers of Aldera, for the next year and a half the two had formed a bond of trust as well as protection for the other. It was enough to get Izuku to start training his body in order to get stronger himself against both his own bullies as well as protect Corey herself. Even though the girl was happy with the increase to his own confidence whenever she was around, she did notice that he was way too humble when it came to compliments. And it was here during this time frame, as they were in their second year of junior high, that the two had accidentally entered a loving relationship. Izuku had just entered the roof where the two could eat in peace without any distractions. They were eating their lunch as Izuku expressed how much he cared for her. And completely out of left field, both of them leaned in to kiss one another before pushing each other apart immediately and looked at one another for a moment. "I didn't mean to do that," Izuku said, as Corey just giggled slightly. "I didn't mean to do that either." "But did you mean what you said about me?" she asked, as Izuku stared at her stunned for a moment before speaking. "You are the only person who had made an effort to help me in my life. Nobody's ever done that before, not to mention that you are very kind, caring as well as help me when covering some injuries I get. I just can't get you out of my head," Izuku said, blushing. "Thank you for all those words about me, but you helped me as well. And don't say that anyone would do that. You saw how everyone reacts to the two of us being bullied within this hellscape," Corey said, as Izuku looked at her again. Trauma bonding was something he had heard of before, but the simple fact that it had been about a year since he was introduced to her, it seemed like he was moving too fast into a relationship. But he didn't deny that he didn't want one with her either. She was quite literally the only one who showed that she never cared for his quirklessness. Not to mention that the two were cleaning a beach on Takoba Municipal Beach Park in order to help him increase his musculature. If he wants to join UA University in a year and a half, he will need to increase his workload so that he can take the dangerous entrance exams. The two were walking away from the school now as they thought about the future of their lives together. Izuku was staying with Corey's family for a while longer since he would need to get a job soon to take care of himself. But the best part about this was how Corey's parents, Krozl and Liz, were going to be retiring from their criminal lifestyle soon. Izuku had entered the home of the Kazuyuki family as Corey had entered behind him as they took off their shoes before moving towards the bedroom of the girl. The young man was very well trusted by Corey's parents to not do anything very bad to her when they were gone. Just wouldn't ever expect him to date her was what they weren't expecting. As during dinner, the two children made the parents of Corey see it was known that the two were going to become a couple soon, much to Liz's happiness. A few months into the end of the term for their second year of Aldera, Izuku and Corey had entered a night of love whilst Corey's parents were in another prefecture. They made it known that they wanted this, and with Izuku getting a small-time job over at the small convenience store nearby, it was a cause for celebration. Just the young man never guessed it would be what happened that night. For him, he was very new to the idea of sleeping together, and Corey was the same. They would wake up to Krozl and Liz taking pictures of the two in the same bed with mirthful smiles on their faces. So, since you both didn't wear protection, when will we be expecting grandchildren? Liz asked, as Izuku and Corey looked to one another with fear in their eyes. Izuku and Corey had stayed closer together over the next months after they were caught doing the deed. And the two were very glad that Corey didn't get a baby from their night of passion, so that was a bullet dodged at that moment. Neither wanted to become parents during middle school, but that wouldn't mean that they didn't enjoy having those moments over the next few months. At least with protection this time. The two had managed to graduate from Aldera Junior High and had applied to the only school who would allow Izuku to join them, since it was the best in the district. So it wasn't a surprise when everyone knew that Izuku was quirkless as well, and most of the students who entered Aldera High School was just as bad, if not worse, towards the quirkless young man. Corey had been quiet during all the bullying that had just gotten worse in their first year, as Izuku would find her most days walking around with an exasperated look on his face. What did they do this time? Corey questioned as Izuku opened up his backpack. Looking into the bag, Corey was immediately repulsed at what was inside his backpack. At least 20 red spider lilies were sitting in the bag. Letting out a sigh of complete exasperation of her own, Corey had led Izuku towards the building's rooftop in order to have some lunch together. Her parents had quit their time as criminals so that they could get jobs to provide for the two children going through high school. Just like previously, Izuku had wanted to get into UA University just to become the world's first quirkless hero, and he had been training hard. Learning martial arts from the internet was very hard, but at the same time the young man had learned early on how to get the forms right. So he was a good martial artist on paper, just needed an opponent to test the moves out on since he never had a sparring partner. Izuku still held a slight fear of Katsuki as the young man had tried to hurt him in the past, and that kind of trauma doesn't leave you. The two were enjoying the silence on the rooftop as they ate their lunch for the day, knowing that the nice, serene calm of the day wouldn't continue further. What are you wanting to become once we get out of high school, Corey? Izuku asked, eating a small sandwich. I personally believe I should become your manager. A heroics manager allows me to spend as much time as I can with you without having to be split apart from you, Corey said, as the two chuckled. Well, don't let me down. I still need to create a hero costume so I can wear it on the streets. Izuku muttered, pulling out a notebook. Corey would listen to the young man mutter to himself about all the support items he would need as a quirkless hero until lunch was over. The two would return back to their classes so that they could continue with their learning, and Izuku was showing signs that he was much better mentally. Katsuki, who was in the same classroom as Izuku, started to growl at how Izuku softly muttered about the lesson to himself. And he would let him mutter to himself as he knew how to get him to fall under his heel once more. He had already called him out for being quirkless at the start of school. It was only a matter of time before his beach would leave him. So as soon as the end of the day came, Izuku put all his things back in his backpack as he prepared to leave. Katsuki decided to have himself and a couple of others follow suit in order to show Izuku his place, as well as make sure that he doesn't do anything rash. Izuku was talking to Corey as the two held hands on their way out of the school grounds. Izuku couldn't help but feel as if something bad was going to happen. So he looked at Corey in order to make sure she knew how he felt. "Are you sure you want me to disappear?" she asked, as Izuku nodded. Jumping into the tree and hiding herself from view, Izuku turned around and pulled out a scrapbook that he used for whenever Katsuki felt like messing with him. And sure enough, not far away from the exit of the school, Izuku found Katsuki and his goons waiting for him there. "Where's your beach, Deku? Last time I saw, she was with you," Katsuki asked, as Izuku gained a defensive look. "Why are you asking, Katsuki? It's none of your business," Izuku said, glaring back. Over the many months of staying with Corey, she had increased his self-confidence to the point that he could talk normally without stuttering. "I wanted to show you both your place, but I guess I can take it out on only you. But the moment I find her again, you don't want to know what will happen," Katsuki said, activating his quirk. Izuku barely flinched for a second, his body having the reaction of past trauma compared to his mind as Izuku relaxed himself. Settling himself into a combat stance, Katsuki noticed how it looked similar to some martial arts he found online and smirked. Did the worthless little Deku try to learn self-defense? Doesn't matter, he won't be able to beat me. Maybe as soon as she watches her boyfriend get beaten by me, she will leave it for me. That sounds like a good idea, Katsuki thought before shaking his head. Izuku kept his quiet stance as he glared at Katsuki with complete neutrality. Katsuki came in with a wild right hook mixed with his explosion quirk as he blasted what he thought was Izuku. Izuku, on the other hand, had ducked under the blow and felt the heat move past his back before grabbing Katsuki's arm, causing him to look shocked as he watched Izuku's eyes appear from the smoke and debris. Tossing him into the air, Izuku jumped up and slammed a foot into the boy's stomach, causing him to slam to the ground. Air out of his lungs, Katsuki tried to think about what in the hell just happened in that moment before a fist appeared in front of his face. A small gust of wind blew softly past his eyes as he watched the calm and calculated gaze of Izuku stare at him from above. "If you want to continue this, Katsuki, you should learn how to fight without your quirk. At least then, you might be able to survive as a hero," Izuku said, as he stood straight upright again. As he started to leave, Katsuki stood back up and ran towards Izuku, and as soon as he pulled his right arm backwards for his explosive right hook, he called out to his lackeys, "Hold him down. I need to teach him a lesson." Katsuki roared as Izuku turned around to be blasted in the abs. As he skidded across the ground on his feet, he felt his arms be grabbed from both sides as he looked to the left and right, finding Katsuki's lackeys. "Really? Resorting to having these two hold me down? That's not very heroic," Izuku said mockingly. Katsuki growled even more and started to release explosive punch after another on Izuku's unprotected chest as well as arms. He wanted to show Izuku who was the superior fighter, and he wouldn't be allowing the worthless Deku to get the upper hand over him. Punch after punch was met with Izuku's body as the boy just stared at him, not giving him the satisfaction of uttering a single sound. Once Katsuki felt like he was done getting his anger out, he let the smoke clear up and found Izuku standing there being held still. His eyes were glaring at him harshly, but at the same time he had a black eye, bloody nose, split lip, as well as his Gakurin was torn and burned. Some of it was melding into his skin through the heat of the burns that he released onto Izuku's body. Letting out a huff of exhaustion, Katsuki told his lackeys to let him go before leaving him on the ground. But not before having his lackeys send kicks to the boy's rib cage, as he didn't even give them the satisfaction of a sound as well. About 15 minutes after the trio of boys had beaten Izuku within an inch of his life, Corey had arrived to Izuku, looking him over. "I can't believe that he still wants to take me away from you. That won't ever happen, especially since you told me all his weaknesses," Corey said, as Izuku weakly stared up at her. "Well, let's just get home. It's been a long day," Izuku said, as Corey nodded. And since that day, the two decided that it was best to walk together much more and split up whenever Izuku felt the feeling of danger. This would continue for 2 years as the two were in 11th grade and after deciding to do the deed without protection. Since they didn't have enough money to get it this time, Corey would be shocked at what happened. The two were at least a few months before graduation into the next grade before university, and she was looking at a recent test she took. It had been a couple of months since their last night of passion, and she looked at the plus sign on the test she had taken. Tears fell from her eyes as she left the bathroom and walked over to where Izuku had been training himself. In the living room, where the boy was seen training in sweatpants as well as a tank top, He looked over to see the tearful face of Kori. "Kori, are you all right?" Izuku asked, worrying about her. "Nothing too bad. Except this," Kori said, as she wiped some tears from her face. Looking at the test, Izuku stared at it for a moment before having a revelation in his mind. "Does this mean?" Izuku asked, stuttering. "We are going to be parents. What should we do?" Kori asked, as Izuku thought about it. "You're finishing high school at home. I can't have you going to school, Kori, especially since Katsuki is searching for you much harder. He, for some reason, wants to make sure that you leave me as well," Izuku said, grumbling. "Well, I hope that you're right, especially since I am at least 4 months pregnant," she said as Izuku sighed. "I can't believe it took me until now to find out that you were in labor. Am I just that oblivious?" Izuku asked, as Kori thought about all the times he saw her belly increasing in size. Shaking their heads in exasperation, they decided to tell Kori's parents, Liz and Kosher, about her pregnancy and ask if they could assist them in raising the child. With the parents' approval of the child being raised within their custody, the duo waited for the day of the child's birth so that they could watch it happen. 9 months later, after training as hard as he could and clearing Dagoba Municipal Beach, Izuku had heard the sounds of an ambulance near his home. Running towards the house, Izuku had heard the paramedics talking about a woman in labor inside the ambulance. "Sir, what's going on? Where's Kori?" Izuku called out to one of the paramedics. "Sir, I need to get Mrs. Kazuyuki to the hospital. She has gone into labor," the paramedic said, trying to close the door. "I'm with her. She's my girlfriend," Izuku said, as the paramedic stared at him before looking to Kori. "Don't worry, sir, he's telling the truth," Kori said, as the man allowed Izuku to get in. The trip to Mizudafu General Hospital was short and bumpy as Kori screamed out in pain as Izuku held onto her hand. "Don't worry, Kori, we're almost there. Just hang on a little longer," Izuku said, as the girl held onto his hand, sweating profusely. As soon as the group of paramedics as well as Izuku entered the hospital with Kori, the doctors told Izuku to stay put outside so that they can help her. And as Izuku waited, he called the Kazuyuki parents in order to tell them about their grandchild being born, and they told him that they'd be there within a few minutes. Surprisingly, the two worked at some convenience stores nearby and were allowed to get off work early to be there for their daughter. Not much time passed before the doctor entered the room where Kori's parents and Izuku waited for anything concrete. "Kazuyuki's?" the doctor called out, as Izuku and the parents of Kori stood up. "Come on. How would you all like to meet your grandchild as well as your child?" the doctor said, as Izuku ran after him with the parents not too far behind. Entering the hospital room, they all found Kori feeding her baby as it tried its best in order to get the milk it required. Moving over next to Kori, Izuku placed a hand over her right hand as the girl looked at Izuku as she smiled. "How would you like to meet your son?" she asked, as Izuku looked at the baby. The baby boy had no hair at the moment, so he didn't know whether or not the child would get his black and green hair or Kori's light blue hair. But as soon as the baby opened their eyes, Izuku was immediately swooning over the boy as he showed one teal-colored eye and one light blue one with flecks of emerald inside. "What do you want to name him?" Izuku asked, as he placed a finger near the boy's hand. The baby boy grabbed the hand with all his strength as Izuku smiled at the baby before Kori smiled at Izuku. "I was thinking, Hayoru, a blend of both our colors," Kori said as Izuku smiled. "It's beautiful. I can't wait to see who he begins to look more similar to," Izuku said, as the two hugged while softly keeping the baby from being squished. It wouldn't be until a few days after the event of birth for Kori to return back home, whilst the parents paid for the hospital bill. The two were now raising the child inside the home as they paid very close attention to how to raise Hayoru. It was a godsend that Kori's parents were there to teach the duo how to raise a child since the two parents wouldn't be around too much. Izuku decided to be the dad who kept a very close eye on his child as he decided to pull himself from school as well so that he could raise his child with Kori. With how smart he really was, it was a wonder how he never graduated from Aldera sooner as they just kept him within the school. Izuku completed his online schooling within the first 2 weeks of trying his best to help Kori raising their child together. This would progress for about a few more months as Kori and Izuku were walking through a park in order to get a view around the Mizudafu area. The two were in silence as they sat on a bench, allowing Hayoru look at their surroundings as his eyes took everything in. But not all things were meant to last, as Izuku heard distinct popping nearby, and immediately stood up and blocked an attack from behind and kept Kori and his child safe. "Where the hell have you been, you worthless DKU?" While both Katsuki screamed and Izuku's child screamed out in fear as well as slight pain. A tiny burn on his hand that wasn't too bad, but enough for Izuku's fatherly instincts to kick into overdrive. Turning to look at Katsuki with a downright furious expression, Izuku stepped towards the boy with anger in his eyes. "What the hell was that for, Katsuki?" Izuku growled out softly. "You suddenly disappeared from Aldera. Did you really think that you could escape from me that easily?" Katsuki asked angrily. "Can you let me live my life in peace and quiet without having you come by to ruin it? You hurt my child." Izuku growled even more. "What do you mean, child? I never knew you had a kid." Katsuki roared. "You burned his hand, Katsuki. If you don't leave right now, I will not be able to stop myself from rearranging your face right now," Izuku said, as calm as possible. "Don't tell me what to do," Katsuki said, throwing a right hook at Izuku. The young man had grabbed Katsuki's hand and twisted it before sending a punch to his face. Then he kicked the boy away. And it wasn't too much longer before he heard Kori screaming in fear as Izuku looked over at Katsuki's lackeys taking the baby stroller away from them, whilst one kept a grip on Kori. Another one then pulled out a knife from seemingly nowhere as he pointed it at Hayoru, and Izuku stopped what he was doing immediately. "You stand very still, Deku. You wouldn't want to have a dead child on your hands now, don't you?" the boy asked condescendingly. "What did you just say?" Izuku asked, staring at the boy, completely forgetting about Katsuki standing up behind himself. And before anything else can be stated, Kori ran towards the boy with the knife, and almost as fast as she pulled the hand with the knife away from their child, the boy pulled his arm away and stabbed the girl in the chest. Izuku's eyes went wide as he stared at Kori falling to the ground in slow motion. Feeling a slight twitch in his eyes, the boy felt Katsuki land a punch on his back, sending him to the ground. Trying to stand back up, Izuku watched as the boy held the knife with the blood of his girlfriend on it and pointed back at his child. "Curse it, why did you stab her? We can't stake our claim on her now," one of the boys called out from the side. But Izuku didn't hear anything as everything was becoming a dull sound as he watched the color in Kori's eyes drain out. The crying of his son was becoming more and more louder as he felt shearing pain from his left arm and pulled himself upright and slammed his face into Katsuki's nose, sending the boy sprawling on the ground. Izuku stood upright as he walked over to the boy with a knife, his eyes slowly becoming pinpricks as he punched the boy in the face, whilst also moving him away from the stroller and kicked him even further away from the stroller. He was completely unaware of the fact that some heroes were making their way over to him as he pulled his son out of the stroller and sat on the ground looking at Kori's dead body on the ground, smiling softly. Katsuki had taken the moment where he had been hit in the face as the time to leave Izuku all alone as he left the scene. Izuku was luckily wearing gloves as he looked at the knife in the ground next to his girlfriend's dead corpse. It wasn't until now that Izuku felt like everything was starting to turn to black as he kept a death grip on his crying son as he held them up to his chest, tears streaming down from his face. The last thing he heard that day was the voice of a hero who was relatively new to the place. "Don't worry, kid. We will get you and your child away from this area and catch those involved," the hero said as Izuku passed out. As soon as Izuku woke up from his slumber, he was surrounded by both of Kori's parents as they stared at him in worry. Liz was crying horribly as Izuku thought about everything that happened, and as he struggled to sit up on the bed, Kosher was immediately pushing him back down on the bed. "Hey, stay down, kid. I know that you are worried about Hayoru right now, but he's fine. Just rest," Kosher said, as Izuku continued to sit upright. "Kori, where is she?" Izuku hoarsely asked, looking around the room. Liz just erupted into a wail as she left the room sobbing, and Kosher just let out some tears before pulling Izuku into a hug before stating, "Kori died 2 days ago at Mizudafu Municipal Park. One of the boys who were attacking you both had a knife and stabbed her in the heart. She died instantly," Kosher said, as Izuku looked up at him, tears now flowing even worse than Liz's. Getting up from the bed as hard as he could, even with toxins going through his system, Izuku tried to leave the room to get to his son. "Hayoru, I need to get to him," Izuku said, stumbling across the room. How he had the strength to go find his son Izuku didn't know. Everything within his body hurt. His mentality hurt worse. But as soon as he made it to the door, the doctor had opened it and immediately tried to push him back to the bed. You shouldn't be out of bed. Your arm was amputated, and you lost a lot of blood. You shouldn't be walking around yet. The doctor said, calling some nurses. Get off of me. I need to get to my son. Izuku said, struggling against all the nurses. Hysterical strength was a beach towards the nurses as Izuku tossed them aside as he left the room looking for his son. As soon as the doctor launched a tranquilizer dart on his back, Izuku then started to feel woozy before he took a knee. I have to get to Hayoru. Izuku muttered before falling to the ground unconscious. Tears continued to flow out of his eyes as Izuku saw the black entering his vision as more nurses ran down the hall. Izuku woke up on the hospital bed again as he groaned softly at the white ceiling before realizing the place he was in. Hayoru, I need to get to him. Izuku muttered before attempting to get out of the bed again. But as soon as he tried to stand up from his bed, he felt something tethering him back to the bed before looking to his right, finding a pair of handcuffs holding him there. What? Why am I handcuffed to the bed? I need to get to Hayoru. Izuku muttered even more as he struggled against the cuffs on the bed, unaware that his heart rate was increasing very quickly, causing doctors and nurses to run into the room to find him struggling. Hey, young man, please just calm down. Your son is all right. I will bring him over to you, but you need to answer a police officer's questions. The doctor said, as Izuku glared at the doctor. I want my son to be here now. Give me back my son. Izuku growled out as he struggled against the cuffs again. When they all heard a slight creaking sound coming from the cuffs, the nurses immediately left the room to find the child of Izuku. A police officer entered the room as he walked over to the young man with a neutral expression on his face. Young man, can you tell me what happened about 3 days ago at Mizudafu Municipal Park? The officer questioned as Izuku stared at him for a moment. Just as Izuku opened his mouth to answer the question, the door opened up again as Hayoru was being brought over to the young man. Placing the sleeping baby in Izuku's arms, the officer and nurse watched as Izuku instinctively had the baby curl into his hold. I was walking to the park with my girlfriend and my newborn son. He's only a few months old right now. But we were attacked by Katsuki Bakugo and a couple of other boys. Katsuki has been making my life a living hell ever since I got my quirkless diagnosis. He's been my bully ever since I was 4 years old, and there isn't anything I can do to stop him from bullying me. Aside from that, the other boys are the ones you should really be questioning right now, because they threatened to kill Hayoru if I didn't allow Katsuki to beat me half to death, Izuku said, as the police officer bristled at the quirkless statement. You're telling me that you were attacked by this Katsuki Bakugo and his friends? The officer asked, as Izuku watched the man's expression darken. Believe me or not, I don't care. All I want is to just be left alone to raise my son in peace, Izuku said, as the police officer took the baby away from him. I'm sorry, kid, but you need to stop lying to me. Doctor, take the child away and send it to the orphanage, the officer said, as Izuku glared hard at the officer. I haven't lied once in my life. Everything coming out of my mouth is the hard truth. If you are going to discriminate against my quirkless status, you might as well finish me now, Izuku said, as the officer stared at him, slowly reaching for his gun. Sitting upright, Izuku glared harder at the officer as the man watched Izuku's aura become much more oppressive. The doctor stared at the two for a moment before taking the child away, making sure that the child didn't go into the orphanage. As soon as the officer pulled Izuku out of the bed harshly, he told him to get his clothes on, as he was part of a homicide case on Kori Kazuyuki. It was a few hours later that Izuku found himself as a defendant in the case against the police department. The officer who was sent out to talk to him being the prosecutor, and as Izuku sat in the booth being questioned, he answered with nothing but the truth. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to be going in his way, as witness accounts state that he was the one to kill Kori, and Izuku knew who they were. The court case was ended as fast as it had started. Izuku was to be placed in juvenile detention until the end of the year. As Izuku was pulled away, he was placed inside a police bin as he thought about everything that happened up until this point in his life. Like, could it get even worse at this point? He knew that he was basically asking God to essentially tell him that it could get worse, but what was the point? The love of his life was killed by someone who pushed the blame onto him because of his quirklessness. He was born quirkless without the chance to make friends because of Katsuki being a complete trash hat, and now his son will never know why he wasn't with his father anymore. By the time Izuku was placed in juvenile detention near Tartarus, Izuku was hidden away inside his cell as he waited for someone to grab him at the right age. His one chance to become a hero taken away from him, all because of some people not wanting to man up and state that they were the reason his life was messed up so horribly. As he waited for the days to continue on without his place in Hayoru's life, Izuku started to work out as hard as he could in his cell. He would get food from time to time from the warden, but he knew what they were doing. They were trying to get him to react, and he wouldn't give them the time or day. He was wrongfully accused of killing his girlfriend, and now everything was pulled out from under himself as he tried his best to be able to leave earlier than his sentence. Over the next few months, Izuku was training as hard as he could, as well as dodging other kids who had done horrible things in their own past. When they asked him whatever he had done, he stayed quiet and strayed as far away from them. He knew that they wanted a reason to kick his butt, new blood and all. It wasn't until around September of that same year that one of the inmates had entered his cell with a few others with smirks on their faces. "We hear that you're the new blood here, quirkless as well. From what I heard, you quirkless freaks are supposed to be cynical monsters who look very ugly. Guess I was wrong," the young man said, as Izuku glared at him harder. "What do you want?" "I'm trying to get some training done here," Izuku said, as the young man grinned. "I'm here to show you your place, right under my foot. So I want you to kiss my feet and praise the ground I walk on," the man said, as the guard stood nearby. "I will not bow to you nor anyone within this place. I will get out of here, find my son, and raise him to be the perfect man for anyone," Izuku said, as his eyes started to flicker from green and red. His fury at his girlfriend's death, the separation from his son, as well as the 10 long years of violent abuse, as well as mental trauma with his near-death experience at the age of 10 coming to a full sight. That was all it took for the two men beside the shorter kid in the middle to come at Izuku in order to kick him to high heaven. But Izuku wasn't as helpless as he used to be. He dodged each attack from the two larger kids who were nearing their adulthood and smashed them into the ground without much effort. The kid in the middle stared at him with shock before pulling out a shiv and lunged to him with as much strength as he could and was punched in the face for his efforts. The shiv had pierced Izuku's abdomen, but he didn't even react to it as he kicked the kid out of his room with his little guards. "Leave me the hell alone. I don't want to have something placed on me because you got a little angry at me," Izuku said, as he closed the doors to his cell. Ripping a part of his shirt off his chest, he wrapped it around the wound on his lower abdomen as he sat back down on the bed. The guards of the juvenile detention center had grabbed the 3 inmates and pulled them away and back to their cells. On the outside of the juvenile detention center, 2 people stood outside of it, as a few days had passed since Izuku was attacked. "Is there a reason why I am here, Tsukauchi?" a black-haired man questioned. "Yes, from what I hear about this kid's case. He was seemingly wrongfully accused of murder. We are coming to make sure that he was not the killer, and it was someone else," Tsukauchi said, as the 2 entered the center. "What brings the lie detector and Eraserhead to our center?" a warden questioned, as Tsukauchi smiled. "We have reason one of your tenants were wrongfully accused of murder." "Well, far be it from me to say that you're wrong." "So who is it?" the warden asked. "One Midoriya Izuku, from what his file states. It seems as though he was a delinquent from school records. But I believe that they fabricated his records to protect those involved with Kori Kazuyuki's murder," Tsukauchi said, not saying that the Kazuyuki family told him about their past as criminals, as well as the fact that their daughter wouldn't be killed by Izuku, and he was framed. "You're telling me that Midoriya Izuku, the quirkless kid, is not a killer?" the warden asked incredulously. "Yes, and I have a reason to believe that if he tells me his perspective of events, that we will find the true killer. After all, he was there when his girlfriend was killed. Right in front of him," Tsukauchi said, as the warden sweated slightly. Arriving at the cell, Eraserhead had looked at the boy in front of him. He had green hair that extended to the lower portion of his neck, as well as freckles that were dotted on his cheeks in a diamond shape. His green eyes were dull as he waited on the bed for something to happen. The hero also couldn't help but notice how there was a blood stain on his abdominal section. "Any reason why he is bleeding right now?" Eraserhead asked, as the warden sighed. "He instigated a fight earlier today, thought that for a slight punishment he should deal with the pain of his wound for a bit longer. The warden said, as Tsukachi sighed. Opening the cell, they brought the young man out of the room as he was completely docile towards their movements. As soon as they got him into a police car, they drove off to the station where they could get his answers recorded for the cold case. It wasn't until a few hours later that the two had managed to get Recovery Girl to heal him up enough to talk to them. "Hello, Midoriya. My name is..." Tsukachi started before being interrupted. "Detective Tsukachi Naomasa, Quirkless Detector. I tried to have you be the detective on my case, but because of my quirklessness, they wouldn't allow me a fair trial," Izuku said, as Tsukachi sat there in shock. "How do you know about my name?" he asked, as Izuku stared at him. "Because what you are in for is a long haul of abuse in mental, physical, as well as emotional," Izuku said, as Tsukachi clicked the record button. Izuku's eyes began to glitter with tears as he began his tale of a quirkless kid growing up in a school that didn't like quirkless individuals. How he met the Kazuyuki family, how Kori herself had saved him from attempted murder on part of Katsuki Bakugo, how the two had a night of passion and resulted in the birth of his son, all the way to how his girlfriend was killed by one of Bakugo's friends who held a knife that the police didn't even try to get fingerprinting done on. How he watched Kori slowly die on the ground with her blood flowing around the ground, especially how he was framed for being the one to murder Kori Kazuyuki. Everything you've said rang true. Do you know who killed Kazuyuki Kori? Tsukachi asked, his anger clearly evident. Yes, I can't remember his name, but I can't get his face nor his physical look out of my head. It's all I see at night, Izuku said, as he took a deep breath. What does this young man look like? So we can have you look at him and point him out as the murderer, Tsukachi said, as Izuku smiled. He is a young man, about my age. He has long black hair as well as a slightly bigger belly. He has a long nose and very angular eyes. His quirk allows him to extend his fingers to the point that they are sharp enough to cut people. He was one of the people who were bullying me since my very early childhood. Ah, I remember his name now. His name is Yubi Yudo, Izuku said, as Tsukachi smiled. Now that we have a name to the description, can you tell us what happened the day of your girlfriend's death? Tsukachi asked, delicately. I was walking to the park with Kori. We just wanted to let in the peaceful air of Mizudafu Municipal Park flow around us. Not much about the time I can remember, but I wanted to have Hayoru have some kind of good memory at the park. But I guess it would forever be his nightmare, Izuku said, as he started to cry. Eraserhead then noticed how Izuku was down an arm physically as he pointed to the missing limb. What happened to your arm? He asked, staring at Izuku neutrally. Katsuki Bakugo. That's what. He has an explosion. Quirk, and since he already hated me with such a passion that he wanted me dead when I was 10, he decided that if he couldn't kill me himself, he would make me an amputee, Izuku said, as Eraserhead nodded. Anything else stated went to deaf ears as Izuku stared at the two of them with tears in his eyes. Can I know what happened to Hayoru? Izuku asked, as the two men nodded. They showed him pictures of his son with a new family. But Izuku recognized the family immediately as soon as he saw Bakugo in the picture. They gave my son to the Bakugos, Izuku growled as he saw Katsuki smirking in the image. Both men looked alarmed at this as they looked at how the baby seemed to not like the boy in the picture from the likes of it. Are Masaru and Mitsuki Bakugo good parents? Tsukachi asked, as Izuku nodded. They are, just not with Katsuki. He was ego-driven from a young age by our teachers. I can't stop him anymore, but I will do one thing. Ruin his life as he had done for me, Izuku said, as he had a small, slightly vengeful smile on his face. I wouldn't recommend a vengeful attitude towards the boy. He may have ruined your life, but that doesn't mean you should do the same, Eraserhead said, as Izuku leveled the hero with a harsh glare. You try being exploded by a nitroglycerin quirk for 90% of your life. Not to mention being tossed off a 7-story building all because the monster wanted you dead. He doesn't even acknowledge other people by their names. He is no hero, he is a villain in the making. He was right there when my girlfriend was murdered. And if he can't be given vengeance for myself, then why are you even helping me? Izuku screamed at Eraserhead. Midoriya, we are here to help you get out of this framed court case. But you need to calm down. We will make sure that the consequences of his actions come to light. But are you sure that you want vengeance on him? Tsukachi asked, as Izuku glared at the detective this time. Try having someone who you thought be your best friend since before the age your quirk came in and have him beat on you for 6 years before tossing you off a roof because he didn't want you around anymore. Then get a girlfriend 2 years later only for his friends to come and hold them at knife point and stab her in the chest right in front of you before laughing about it. All I want is retribution for Katsuki and his stupid friends' actions 8 months ago. Izuku growled at the detective. The court case after that was as fast as the original, although in the favor of Izuku as they found the real murderer, as he had unalived another person in cold blood. The fact that he tried to spin this on Izuku during the trial, seemingly trying to get him back in juvenile detention again, was very telling. It wouldn't be until later that evening that Izuku would arrive at the Bakugo residence as the police and Eraserhead stayed near the vehicles preparing for Izuku to fight Bakugo. Knocking on the door, Mitsuki had opened the door to find a one-armed Izuku standing before her with a sad but happy expression on his face. "Izuku, it's been years since we last heard from you. What happened to your arm?" Mitsuki asked, as Izuku looked behind her to see Katsuki growling audibly at him. "Tell her, Katsuki, tell her what you did to me," Izuku said, as Mitsuki stiffly stood upright before turning around to look at her son. Said boy was staring at Izuku in disbelief, but before he could speak, he pulled his shirt off and showed Katsuki everything he did to him. "You scarred my body, took my arm, and now you think you can take my child away from me?" Izuku asked, as he glared at the boy. Katsuki walked up to Izuku for some reason, seemingly completely calm at the moment, and as he stood in front of Izuku, the two stared at one another for all but a moment. Katsuki gave the child to his mother before pulling Izuku outside harshly as they stood in the front yard of the home. "What are you doing here, Deku? I thought you were in juvenile detention for Kori's death," he asked, as Izuku glared at him harder. "So you think that it was me who killed her as well? Well, you're wrong. It was Yubi Yudo. His fingerprints were on the knife he used to unalive her," Izuku said as Katsuki growled. "I don't know what you're talking about. Yubi is no killer," Katsuki said, as Izuku glared harder. "He was caught red-handed killing the lover of another person not earlier this morning," Izuku said, as Katsuki's eyes widened. "Well, what are you going to do then? Take your son back?" "Well, sorry, but you can't have him back. He's a Bakugo now," Katsuki said, mockingly smirking at Izuku. "Oh, don't worry. You won't be getting your hero license anytime soon," Izuku said, as Katsuki stared at him in confusion. "What are you talking about, Deku?" Katsuki questioned as he watched Izuku make a hand signal. "Katsuki Bakugo, you are under arrest for discrimination against a quirkless individual, attempted murder, as well as aiding and abetting murder," Tsukachi said, as Katsuki stared at the detective who only showed up now. "What the hell? I was no part of that," Katsuki called out, as Tsukachi stared at him closer. His eyes glowed as Katsuki felt like a chill going up his spine as the detective smiled at him. "Lie. I have a lie detector quirk, and you just lied to me. I'm sorry to say, but we are putting you in the juvenile detention center, and he will rehabilitate within your home in the meantime," Tsukachi said, as Izuku stood there shocked at the last part. As soon as that was stated, Eraserhead had activated his quirk and shoved the boy into his police car, and Izuku walked over to the door to the Bakugo household and knocked on the door again. "Izuku, are you all right? Where is Katsuki?" she asked, as Izuku sadly sighed. "Aunt Mitsuki, I need to tell you both about mine and Katsuki's relationship over the last 10 years, Izuku said, entering the home. As soon as he sat down at the table with Katsuki's parents, he told them everything about what their son has done in the past, all leading up to the moment right now where said parents were holding on to Hayoru in their arms as they cried. They had no clue about Katsuki being such an arrogant child, as well as murderous young man up until now. "Don't worry, Andy. Katsuki will be getting out soon so that he can repay me back," Izuku said, as both parents looked at him confused. "What are you talking about?" Mitsuki asked as Izuku smiled. "You know that saying about revenge?" Izuku asked, as Mitsuki and Masaru looked at him oddly. "It's best served cold," Izuku said, as he shook his head. "I'm sorry about scaring you both. Just 10 years worth of fury, hate, as well as sadness to get over. Although the sadness is recent," Izuku said, as both of the Bakugo matriarch and patriarch nodded. Giving the boy to Izuku, the young man pulled his hand to the child's face as they opened their eyes. The eyes of Hayoru staring into Izuku's eyes as the baby smiled happily and started babbling about Izuku to the boy's delight. So, this was the end of part 1 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.